So, Mr. Moodley, preparing for the kickoff of the season, there's the proposed or finalized date. You'll tell us more about this, 18th of March 2023. There's been some debate around this, and what can you tell us today about this date?
Yes, so how we got to the 18th of March in the end was that we called a meeting of the trainers. It was a racing fixtures meeting where part of that meeting was to determine the date for the start of the season. The invitation was extended to each of the trainers in Mauritius, and those in attendance were then presented with the date of the 18th of March. At this time, the majority of trainers who were at that meeting, and if they had sent a representative, we had recognized that representative, voted and were happy with the start of the season commencing on the 18th of March. There were some dissenting trainers, which by my recollection was about 4 trainers at the time, but they varied in their vocal rejection. So one trainer was particularly vocal because he was of the opinion that starting the season when they were starting it didn't suit him because he has championship aspirations, and the other 3 were more concerned about when their horses would be ready, one of which said, well, I'll run my horses when they're ready, I'm not too concerned whether the season starts on the 18th or not. So what we had was a majority of trainers at the official meeting where everyone was invited to that elected to start the season on the 18th of March. That decision was then finalized after that meeting, because obviously if you have an official meeting and you take a vote at that meeting and we've canvassed you, then that's really the end of the discussion afterwards. But in this case, it didn't appear to be the case, because after the conclusion of that meeting, we then received a letter, the HRD, where the 4 trainers had highlighted their aspects of dissent in a letter. At that time, there were only 4 signatures on that letter, and there are currently 17 trainers licensed in Mauritius. In the letter, they highlighted 4 points, which we've discussed with them. And in those 4 points, none of those points were significant enough that it was going to sway away from an official meeting where a vote was taken regarding the start of the season. So the issues that were raised were either an issue that was personal to themselves, or it was an issue that didn't warrant swaying away from what the majority at the official meeting wanted. So the HRD wrote back to these 4 trainers and advised them of that, and then subsequently the same letter arrived, which with the same points which the HRD had already considered and held, didn't contain anything that had any valid points in it to overturn a majority decision at an official meeting. And then there were 8 signatures on it. But even at that point, the decision had already been taken to start the season, because we've had an official meeting, we've had a vote, and we've given you the opportunity to interact with us. So at that juncture, we then wrote back to the trainers, and we've had to put out a communique afterwards regarding how the HRDs perceive the season. And because there's no valid points, whether there's 4 signatures or more signatures, it doesn't matter because the points haven't changed. Subsequent to that, we've received communication from other trainers who've advised us that there's no objection, one of which is on that letter, to the season starting on the 18th of March. I've received a phone call yesterday, and we've received another communication from another trainer who said he'll have as many as 10 horses ready for the 18th of March. So, in summary, we took a vote at an official meeting. The majority decided the 18th of March is appropriate. The 18th of March fits into the HRD's plan for the season because it gives us flexibility in the event that something goes wrong during the season, and also managing the track. And so that's the starting date. Unfortunately, what's transpired in this process is something that in my time in Mauritius seems to happen every year before the commencement of the season, which is that there's a particular agenda that's being punted, and that agenda is now being punted through the press. There have been several news reports in a certain newspaper regarding what's transpiring from a racing perspective and trying to attribute meaning to things that really have no meaning other than what they are. Now, the HRDs put out a communique on this. it's dismayed at this level of journalism. We encourage public discourse because we understand the passion that people in Mauritius have for horse racing. And it's a passionate business. If you're not passionate about it, you're in the wrong business. But at the end of the day, the truth also needs to be out, and people need to understand that. 18th of March was the date every single trainer had the opportunity to express a view on or not express a view on. And at that official meeting, the majority of trainers expressed a view that they were happy to race. Now put that in perspective, that means for the first race meeting, there's in excess of 150 horses with the number of trainers that voted that would be available in their stables to race. And then of course you factor in that programming, as is always the case at the start of the season, is built around the number of horses that are available. It makes the percentages for the start of the season very high. And so logically speaking, if we can bring horse racing back at a convenient time, which balances all of the competing interests of the owner and the trainer and the jockey, as well as the needs of the track and health and safety, then why wouldn't we start on the 18th of March? So all of the hype has been centered around certain news reports and certain trainers objecting, but the truth is that you've had your chance, we've given you an opportunity, we've followed due process, and the fact that a particular agenda is being punted in the press once again before the commencement of the season cannot affect what is the correct decision to be taken under the circumstances with the process that's followed.
So, just to summarize, the season is starting on the 18th of March.
Yes, barring any acts of God or weather-related issues, the trainers have given a commitment, and there are a number of them that have given a commitment, that their horses will be ready to fill a race card on the 18th of March.
And you've seen the weather, you just said it. If ever like it rains every week and it affects training, what will be the position of the HRD?
Well, if there are no horses to run on the 18th of March because there's been weather that's affected the track or it's affected the training, then we can defer the season. But that's the benefit of starting on the 18th, is that it gives us options to move dates around. I'll give you an example. Everyone talks about the worst case scenario, and it's always best to plan for it. But let's say there aren't weather issues and horses can train and they are available, as is the norm, for the 18th of March. Then we have a date to start racing. Versus a different situation if we set up racing for later in April, for example, anticipating rain or anticipating weather that never arrives. So why not give ourselves a chance to start at a time that keeps the pressure off the horses in the track? We often forget that this track is a delicate balance between raceable and unraceable at times. And so we've got to strike that balance. And the second thing is that we forget is that Mauritius has a very small horse population. So you've got to manage that workload of the horse. And so if we can build in a break in the season as well, that can only be to the benefit of the horses and of course the public, because if the horses are fit and ready and they can get a break as well, then they run better and they're more consistent. And if the track is fair and the track is consistent and has an opportunity to recover, then that leads to fair racing. So when you factor in the benefits and the value that's associated with the 18th of March, why would we use another date, particularly when there's a significant portion of the trainers that are happy? And it bears noting that of the trainers that have highlighted their dissent, 2 of them have already contacted me and said, yes, we have signed the document, but we understand that we actually have no objection to racing starting on the 18th, because if our horses are ready, then we'll nominate them. But if they're not ready, then we just won't run on that date. And I was contacted by a trainer who'd signed that document, one of his representatives who runs the stable, as early as yesterday, where he highlighted that he actually has no objection to the season starting on the 18th. And these are the games that go on in the background with regard to agendas being punted ahead of the best interest of the sport of horse racing. And that's why you have the HRD, because we're not a club, we're a regulator, and we'll make the best decision in our minds for horse racing.
And is there any possibility of having more trainers joining in this season?
Yes, there's a strong possibility that more trainers will be joining in the season. We've identified a certain number of trainers which we think will be ideal, if that number fills this year, then it fills, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But the HRD has structured the training program a bit better, where we've worked out the number of horses that we have in order to fill fields consistently through the year, and what type of trainers that we'd like to have, and the quality of trainers that we'd like to bring in, because the HRD in Mauritius is in the process of globalizing with the new race courses that are built and the foreign investment that's coming in, and perhaps some of the trainers that come in should be reflected by that. So there certainly is news to come on that.
And overall preparations are already on at the HRD level in view of this new season.
Yes, it's actually busier at the HRD at the moment than it is in a normal racing week, because there are certain structures and systems that are being ripped up from last season and rebuilt. And so each of those are being put back together now in order to be more effective. As you'll know, is that when you have a new organization, you put in place certain structures and systems, and some of them work and some of those don't. And the true sign of a successful organization is conducting an intense self-scrutiny, and then determining what works and doesn't work, and being big enough to walk away from things that don't, and being big enough to understand that when things need to be changed, it's not a sign of weakness to change, it's actually a sign of strength. And so that's what the HRD is doing at the moment. There's still a few changes that are going to be announced in the next week, and that will better enable us to regulate horse racing for the season. And I think the public will enjoy the information a bit better also.
And one of the points raised from last season is the handicapping horse rating system. Are you working on a new system, or is it going to be same as last year?
The system will not be the same as last year. It will change for sure. The extent of the changes will be approved by the Horse Racing Committee, which sits in this week, and then it will be disclosed to the public afterwards. But we've analyzed the system. We've done an intense analysis of the data of the horses, which includes every single increase and drop for the season, and where the horse population fits in numbers-wise in the handicapping categories of the horses. We've compared that to the previous years, and we've worked out on a sliding scale and on a graph where the peaks and the troughs are, and we've got to flatten certain peaks, and we've got to raise certain troughs. So that's what we're doing at the moment, and in the end, the system, horse racing-wise, rating-wise, will look very similar to what it has at the beginning of the last few seasons as well.
So, is there any conference or any applications made to be registered at the International Horse Racing Federation or something?
Yes, so our application for a recognition by the International Horse Racing Federation and to be part of the Asian Racing Federation is currently pending. The matter goes before the membership in February at the upcoming Asian Racing Conference. It's already gone through the executive part of the committee that's in the Asian Racing Federation. So it's really just a vote of the membership. From what we've seen, there's discussions that have happened, and we've sent through the necessary documentation. It's a nice to have for Mauritius, but as we've seen already, South Africa where the majority of our riders have come from, and all of our horses obviously, South Africa have already scrutinized the processes of the HRD through the Anthony Andrews matter. I'm not sure if the public are aware the extent of the scrutiny, but Anthony Andrews had applied to South Africa for his suspension to not be reciprocated and not be applied at all in South Africa. And in terms of South Africa's rules, they analyze the process that's adopted, the rationale of the stewards, and look at the outcome and determine, in their opinion, based on each of the transcripts and the records of proceedings, whether the decision was justified under the circumstances and followed due process, and was of course logical in horse racing conclusion. And I believe the racing executive and his team of senior members analyzed each of that data and reciprocated the penalty. So yes, it's nice to have that we will be part of the IFHA and the Asian Racing Federation, but the reciprocation of penalties, which is the big benefit of being part of those organizations, are already being enforced on a Mauritian level. An addition to that is that being part of that federation, you have to be compliant with various articles that are published from time to time. And in terms of our rules, we're already compliant with the majority of those articles. So it's the classic case of form over substance. And we're satisfied that substance-wise, even without that official recognition, we still fit firmly into the category of an international organization whose regulation has been recognized. In fact, just recently, Bernard Faidherb, who's withdrawn his appeal, we've applied to South Africa for reciprocation, and Dennis Schwartz couldn't ride for his second race meeting in South Africa after picking up a suspension on his last day. So the recognition's already come on an international level. It's just a matter of joining the body. So we hope for the best in February, but the substance of what we're looking for, we've achieved already.
So if ever it's done, it will be Mauritius, let's be clear on this, registered at the International Horse Racing Federation and Asian Racing Federation.
Yes, Mauritius is registered at the moment. One of the requirements for registration under the IFHA and the ARF is that you must be the sole regulator of horse racing in your country. So the reason the MTCSL was referred to specifically before was because at that time they were the sole regulators of horse racing in their country. So that's a requirement. And so even though they're mentioned by name, it's that you are a regulator in a country, and under each of the signatories for the articles, when you look at who's a subscriber to those articles, it doesn't say a club name, it says a country's name. So for example, with the articles it says South Africa. If you were to look at a specific article, it says Mauritius. So it's all about a country and its association with that level of regulation.
Trois sur 3 pour Noémie Alphonse ce samedi en Australie. D'abord aux 100 mètres où elle s'est imposée facilement. Une petite démonstration signée la para-athlète mauricienne. Elle a enchaîné par la suite aux 400 mètres, encore plus facilement. Alphonse était face à des athlètes venant de certains territoires australiens, ainsi que du Japon et de la Nouvelle-Zélande, entre autres. Aux 1500 mètres à la mi-journée, une belle bataille entre Noémie Alphonse et Andrella Ballade, une Australienne plusieurs fois médaillée aux Jeux paralympiques et qui était aussi sur le podium des Jeux du Commonwealth. Alphonse aura le dernier mot, notre compatriote qui est sur la bonne voie, malgré une chute il y a quelques jours.
Une épreuve qui est plus importante, c'était aujourd'hui et je suis assez stressée ce matin parce qu'avec ma chute, je faisais une cassée et qui une heure de temps avant me les coups 100 mètres, je réussis à me fauteuil. Je passe près avec mon réco 400 qui m'a mettre la semaine dernière. Aujourd'hui, je fais 55-13, très satisfaite de mon 400. Je suis satisfaite aussi de mon 1500 qui me roule beaucoup mieux que la semaine dernière.
Elle peut maintenant viser ses autres objectifs de l'année après cette première sortie australienne.
Je suis très satisfaite de ma première sortie parce qu'après un mois, j'ai dit à nous bien travail et nous venons là pour juste que nous situer. Mais que nous situer pour nous vendre Maurice et d'Afrique. Ça nous continue de travail pour les championnats du monde et pour qu'ils nous sortions en pleine forme.
Le troisième de cette tropicale à Lissabon, mesdames et messieurs.
Une troisième place historique au général pour Christopher Lagan. Un podium également pour lui samedi lors de la 6e étape. Le tout agrémenté de belles prestations des autres membres de la team Maurice MCB. Après une semaine de compétition au Gabon, les motifs de satisfaction sont nombreux dans le camp mauricien.
C'est une expérience incroyable et on a vraiment fait une super course avec plusieurs top 10 dans les sprints avec Alex et toute l'équipe a vraiment travaillé pour obtenir ces résultats-là. Cette troisième place, c'est aussi une victoire pour l'équipe.
Encore une fois, la team Maurice a été à la hauteur lors de cette 16e édition de la Tropicale Miss Bongo. Hormis Christopher Lagan, d'autres membres de l'équipe se sont mis en évidence, notamment Alexandre Maire, qui par 2 fois a terminé dans le top 10 et qui a pris au final la 20e place. Après la Tropicale Miss Bongo, la prochaine cible dans le viseur de la team Maurice sera les championnats d'Afrique sur route. Ils se disputeront du 8-13 février au Ghana. L'objectif sera de faire aussi bien, sinon mieux qu'en 2022, en Égypte, où Maurice avait glané une médaille d'or, 2 d'argent et 1 de bronze.
Il fait la fierté de la France, mais aussi de Maurice, pays natal de ses parents. Adam Xiao Kim-fa est devenu vendredi le nouveau champion d'Europe de patinage artistique. En Finlande, au terme d'un joli programme libre, il a remporté la compétition devant un Italien et un Suisse.
Remporter ce titre signifie beaucoup pour moi. C'est un objectif que j'ai atteint et en même temps, ça confirme que j'ai ma place parmi les meilleurs patineurs mondiaux. Je suis né en France, mais mes parents ils sont de l'île Maurice et le fait de savoir qu'il y a aussi beaucoup de Mauriciens qui me suivent, c'est une fierté aussi. Effectivement, quand je patine, c'est le but d'être en connexion avec le public, qu'il soit présent ou non. Je veux pouvoir raconter une histoire où chaque personne, chaque spectateur, ou même le jury, peut rentrer en connexion avec moi.
Même à des milliers de kilomètres, Adam dit compter sur le soutien de tous les Mauriciens.
Et quelques mots à dire pour tous les Mauriciens qui m'écoutent et qui me soutiennent. Avant tout, je tiens à tous les remercier. J'aimerais bien retourner à l'île Maurice. Ça fait bientôt 11 ans que je suis pas allé là-bas. J'aimerais bien y retourner.
Le jeune patineur poursuit son rêve. Dans cette discipline, il est devenu champion de France en décembre dernier. En 2022 toujours, il s'était classé à la 14e place aux Jeux Olympiques de Pékin.